Today we're taking a look at the Annapolis. This is the latest super ship that I've decided to purchase. I got it before the Conde and before any of the destroyers or the super carrier. And that's because Des Moines is such a classic in this game that having a 12 gun Des Moines is just too much fun. I think it's a very interesting ship that has the ability to farm at long range, as well as have a huge battle impact with its radar. And, well, this burst fire, as we're going to see in this game a couple times, is going to massively crush some destroyers. So, Annapolis to me is a very, very interesting super ship. More interesting even than some of these super battleships, where you get a gimmick that gives you one really accurate salvo or slightly better, longer range secondaries. Here we're getting the opportunity to burst fire or have an insane DPM. You'll notice here that I am actually using range mod, and that's really just down to how passive the game is these days. But a lot of these matches, though, happened to be well within our normal range of our guns, so I should probably give the reload mod a go. That's probably the better way to go about it. Also, the, floatiness of these shells at long range is pretty tough to lead, but the damage output is still ridiculous. With a 5.5 second reload, yeah, you're going to do a lot of damage very, very, very quickly in this thing. HE or AP, it really doesn't matter. We continue, of course, to have that super heavy AP, which means we have improved pen angles. So using our armor piercing against slightly angled targets or even very well angled targets should net us some good damage. But for now, long range, HE spam, trying to light some fires on these battleships and being reasonably successful in doing so. Sorry about the hitching or lag here. That is just down to my internet when I was playing. It was an especially bad day for Starlink. So yeah, it wasn't going so well for me. But at least I shoot so quickly that it doesn't matter that there's a couple salvos that aren't perfectly aimed. So we farmed up a little bit of damage on the A flank, and now we have to deal with a Schlieffen pushing middle. And I really want to note what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to stay at 12.6 kilometers. That's my goal, is to get there and just stay there. As we all know, Schlieffen with a full secondary build gets 12.5 kilometers of range and a 12.6 kilometer detect. There's this fine little line that we can ride where we can actually spot the Schlieffen and his secondaries can't shoot us. Although unfortunately, I didn't take into account the storm, so he's going to go undetected as soon as this storm reaches him, which is unfortunate, but we would have had a decent time farming out this Schlieffen and probably killing him outright, because we have a lot of teammates that could possibly shoot him. However, the storm does save this Schlieffen, and honestly, he timed it quite well to push into the cap just as the storm was getting there. And of course, I have to angle. They have their own super cruiser, the Conde, and I don't really particularly want to sit out and take a bunch of damage from that guy. And Schlieffen secondaries, of course, once they build up their accuracy, are pretty devastating as well. So I move on from there and really need to lock down this C push. As we all know on this map, this is a pretty significant choke point at the C cap here, where you don't really want to let enemies through for free. So it's important that we try and do some decent damage here while these ships are caught in a crossfire. But unfortunately for us, but smart play by the enemy team, they are happening to push right with this storm. So it's a little tough to have vision here, especially since our DDs are basically all gone at this point. We only have one Kitakaze left, who is not in position to be spotting this flank. Now, I am playing this very, very passively, and I talked about the battle impact that you can have at close range with the radar. And this was my first game in the Annapolis, so still needing to get used to the way this ship can play, how aggressive I can actually get to be without overcommitting and losing my ship for free. And I wanted to see generally how well this ship could farm at range. And unsurprisingly, it is very, very good at this long range farming. But we'll see in a little bit what it can do at more close ranges. And that's why I think the Annapolis is so good. The Conde, of course, is great and probably better than the Annapolis at this long-range farming. The ability to increase your HE pen every once in a while with its special gimmick, as well as burst out a couple salvos as well. It's much better at range, but the Annapolis having the ability to impact the game at closer ranges is why I went for it first. But that said, if you go for the Conde first, I think that is an excellent choice as well. They're both really interesting, strong cruisers. Sorry, not carriers. But the carriers are both probably really strong as well. I haven't played them, but from what I've seen, they're a little bit overpowered. So if you're looking for the absolute best battle impact ship, the carriers are probably the way to go. But for me, I really don't enjoy that playstyle. I'd much rather be playing a surface ship, who, if they spot an enemy destroyer, can swap over to the burst mode and, well, have the salvo of death. Or at least that's what I'm calling it, as we absolutely destroy that Jowland. And that is, I think, the best use of this burst fire. Unfortunately, we do lose this one, but farming some damage, figuring out the ship, it was a decent first match, I would say, as I'm learning to play this super cruiser. And in fact, I even managed to make a few credits on this loss anyway. But as I'm playing this ship, I really do want to get it into closer quarters engagements. It's hard to lead these targets at long range, and the dispersion leaves a little bit to be desired as well. So at closer ranges, easier to lead targets, and the dispersion has less of an impact. So that's what we're going to do here a little bit as the enemy team pushes. I'm going to make several mistakes in this game though, and I'll point them out as we go along. But the burst fire could also be used not just for finishing off an enemy destroyer, a broadside cruiser. And our shells mostly land in the water just in front of his ship. Unfortunate, but that aiming bug is still something to consider. One of the reasons why using high explosive is generally going to lead to more success. AP requires precise aim and hitting specific parts of the enemy ship. And while we currently have a decent aiming system, it's really not perfect, and there's a lot of bugs. So armor piercing is always going to have a lot more variance, a lot more RNG to even do the supposed consistent damage that the AP should do out of this Annapolis. But that's not really the big mistake here. I think it was good to try for that AP salvo into that enemy Annapolis. No, the big issue here is that I'm going to use my burst fire on this Freddy in an attempt to finish him off. That's another decent way to use the burst fire. Although, he's on a little bit too much HP, don't you think? Especially for our HE to finish him off here. And yeah, 9 shatters, and we only took him down, what, another 6,000-7,000 damage? And we have this incredibly long reload to wait now. That's a pretty big issue. So as I'm learning the ship, it is good to know when I should and should not be using this burst fire. Obviously, that was not the right time to do it. So now this Freddy gets a ton of secondary damage into me and potentially could finish me off with some really good accurate AP, but he aims for my side. And of course, Annapolis, having Des Moines armor, is able to auto bounce the 406mm guns at a decent angle. So I'm safe, but a big misplay there from my part. I definitely could have helped finish off that Freddy much sooner. Here, however, another good play as we go to finish off this Carnot with some burst fire. This is a great spot to be in, where we can use our burst fire to get a few extra salvos and a little bit extra damage into a ship that is disappearing behind an island. So that's really my advice to you guys, at least as I'm learning to play this ship. Try and use this burst fire to finish off your opponent if you're very sure you can finish off your opponent. Or if they're going to go behind an island or get undetected, it's another good way to use it as well. But don't just use it at any time possible, because it significantly reduces your DPM. Now here, we do have a little bit of an issue. I'm spotted using my radar, but I don't spot the DD yet. We have worse concealment than Des Moines, so it's a little harder to catch these DDs within our radar. I think that makes sense though, as yeah, another salvo of death finishes off the Shimakaze. So I think Annapolis is a ton of fun, and as I learn to play it, it's only going to get better. As for the commander, I just moved over my Des Moines captain, so I'm using Halsey. If I get a Confederate a little earlier in the game, we'll certainly have an improved reload then as well. But it's a pretty standard commander, trying to play a little bit safe with Concealment Superintendent and Survivability Expert, only buffing our damage output really with Adrenaline Rush and Top Grade Gunner. And of course, Grease the Gears is quite nice on some of these slower turning turret cruisers that have a fast reload. And Gunfeeder, basically just a must with a ship like this that has such good armor piercing and high explosive. The modules look like this. I'm running range mod right now, but I will definitely be trying out reload. I think that could be very interesting since I believe it's a 16.2 kilometer range. A little bit more than base Des Moines, which is quite nice as well. The other upgrades are all pretty standard, I would say, definitely using propulsion mod for better maneuverability around islands when I'm a little more stationary, and to potentially speed juke in open water against battleships at longer ranges. But I've had a lot of fun with the Annapolis so far, and I really haven't played that many games. And as I get better at it, I'm sure I'm going to bring a few more videos with this ship with some pretty monstrous numbers, since this ship is amazing. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.